Hello, welcome to the webinar for the working group on physiological bases of Manakin behavior. I'm Matt Fuxjager, one of the co-leaders of the group. I'm from Wake Forest University. The other co-leader is Brent Horton from Millersville University, and we're working together on this alongside our current participants, which include Lainey Day from Ole Miss, Leo Fusani from the University of Vienna, Ignacio Moore from Virginia Tech, Brant Ryder from the Smithsonian, and Barney Schlinger from UCLA. Having just outlined everybody, we'd like to start by kind of saying that we suspect there's other researchers who do not necessarily focus on physiology, but that dabble in physiology. So they have some physiological data, or maybe they don't do any physiology, but they have access to physiological data that can address important questions. And we would like to invite you into the fold. We'd like to invite you into the group. Whether you take on a large role in this group, it's not necessary or relevant to us per se. We just want to include anybody who has a remote interest in physiology, because we think that by cooperating with everybody, even kind of an unsuspecting physiologist, we can potentially answer some very interesting questions about how manakins and other tropical birds work. So if we get to our working group goals, the first primary goal of this meeting that's upcoming is to generate a conceptual framework or a series of hypotheses about the physiological bases of manakin behavior. We'd really like to generate these hypotheses so that they're broad and not just applicable to manakins, but also extend to the physiology of other birds and animals. So what we want to do is we want to come up with these hypotheses, and then we want to think about what types of data, resources, and funding will it take to address these hypotheses. And how might the RCN facilitate the acquisition of these things? How can we use our cooperation through the RCN to gather these data, to gather these resources that are important for these fundamental questions? Our second series of goals are a bit more practical in that we want to create tools for researchers within the RCN and potentially outside of our group to study the physiology of manakins and other birds. So one of these things includes the creation of a database that lays out the physiological data and resources, and by resources I mean things like tissue samples or blood samples that individuals currently have, can address the hypotheses that we think are big and fundamental and exciting about physiology. So what do we already know? What data do we already have that can inform these hypotheses? That's one of the things we want to begin communicating. To this end, we also want to create a wish list of data and resources that we think we need to address some of these fundamental hypotheses. And we think this is important because we think that some individuals are collecting data, and while they're getting their data for behavior or for ecology, they could at the same time be collecting easily some other data that might be really important to physiological mechanism. So we want to put out this wish list of things that we would like to have. And then finally, we think it's important to create an accessible repository that contains protocols that share basic physiological techniques. So you would be able to access this repository, you'd be able to see how to collect tissue or blood for DNA analysis, for RNA analysis, for hormone analysis more easily, or it would at least point you in the right direction and give you some people to contact to be able to learn these techniques. So those are the main goals of the working group this time around. Now I want to talk a little bit about some of the products we would like to come away from the meeting with. So the first product we want to see developed is we would like to write a review paper that summarizes these fundamental hypotheses that the working group has outlined. One, we think it's important to show that the thinking fostered through the working group and the RCN is productive, and we're producing a result. But another goal of this is to really put mannequins on the map as model systems for the study of this intersection between physiology, behavior, and evolution. We think that enough of us are doing really interesting work, and a lot of work, that we should be able to take this body of data, coalesce it, and show it to others in a way that makes folks think, oh, okay, so mannequins really are the system where you can nicely study how physiological mechanisms evolve to support sexually selected behaviors. So in our meeting earlier this summer, we talked about some of the topics that we would like to discuss within this review. And so I've listed 3 of these topics down below on the slide. This is by no means an exhaustive list of everything. These were just some basic ideas that we batted around because we were producing some exciting results in these areas, and we felt that others within the RCN might also have data that can contribute to these areas, and we could further extend our knowledge here. And so these include things like energetics and metabolism. So obviously to study these, we need to know more about things like migration, more about things like diet. And so we think this applies to a lot of people within the RCN. Also, things like the neuromuscular control of complex behavior, or even the biomechanics of that mannequin's acrobatic movements. So in this vein, one of the main immediate goals of our working group is to really walk away from our meeting in August with a strong outline of this review paper. So we want to have our hypotheses developed, written out, and then we want to have an outline of the view we plan to write in the fall, and hopefully we would publish this, or submit it at least, before the next meeting in 2017. So we really want to get moving on this paper so we can kind of frame the questions and have a productive working group. At the same time, we want to begin laying the groundwork to create these databases that we think are important for everyone and will be an important tool going forward. So we want to create this database that contains all the information needed to see what data researchers currently have that's relevant to physiology, and also what data we currently want or we think we need to have. And we'd also like to begin creating this open access repository that stores protocols for basic physiological techniques. And basic techniques include things like blood and tissue collection or basic hormone analysis. And they can also range to things that are more complicated, but we would really like to see a span of different techniques within there, and contact information. So maybe if you want to do something really complicated, you can know who to call. So at the meeting, we plan to work on kind of all the products that I previously mentioned. But another important point that I want to make is we really want to get input from others at the RCN about what they think these priority questions should be and how our working group can benefit them and to solve some of these questions, but also solve other things. So, for example, there may be physiological techniques that folks feel are important to address or that could be easily addressed, but they really don't know where to get these protocols. And so we would be interested in knowing what sorts of techniques are people interested in doing going forward. And so how can our working group put something together that will facilitate that will further that? And then, of course, also on a conceptual level, what are the questions physiologically that people think are important or that are relevant to their research that they think should be addressed? We would be very interested and curious to hear that. So with that, again, I just want to reiterate that we welcome anybody and everyone into the group, even if you just want to chat and you don't want to firmly kind of join the group and take on a big role within the group. We really believe strongly that a lot of people have data, or again, have access to data that could be very informative physiologically. And so, we wanna work with everyone to move this field forward. So with that, thank you very much, and I look forward to a productive meeting.